Hey everyone, welcome back. Once again, I'm Sam and I'm joined by Jesse.
Hey.
And today we're going to be talking about the Resurrectionists.
Indeed.
So in Malifaux, there is a form of magic that doesn't exist on Earth. Now, if you've played other games, you know it as necromancy, but in Malifaux, it's resurrectionism.
Yep.
The Grave Spirit is a dark, malign influence that has been let into the world by Titania eons ago, and the Grave Spirit lingers and whispers into the ears of certain unlucky individuals. The Grave Spirit's whisper corrodes their sanity, but it teaches them secrets of necromantic magic. And once they've learned it, they have no choice but to use that power.
And great power it is.
Yes, a lot of the most dangerous people in Malifaux are resurrectionists who can raise huge swarms of corpses, combining them with machines sometimes, or calling spirits out of the ether to kill their enemies. They're dangerous. They're also, I would say, of all the Malifaux factions, probably the biggest villains.
Yeah, definitely. There's not a good one amongst them. Save one.
Maybe one.
Maybe one.
But overall, the Resurrectionists are great. They're durable, as you would expect from the undead. They're terrifying. And if you really like playing villains, you can do a lot worse than playing the Green Gang.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So we're going to start with the first Resurrectionist master, Dr. Douglas McMourning.
Oh, Dougie.
He used to be a guild dual faction master because he used to be the guild coroner, which, as you might imagine, is a really great job for a necromancer to have.
Yeah, easy access to corpses all day, all night.
And so what McMourning would like to do is take the best parts from all the different corpses and stitch them together to make experimental creations.
He was literally the reanimator.
Of course.
Yes.
They have, unfortunately, caught him and kicked him out. So now he makes his home in the sewers. But his basic operating principle is the same. He stitches together the best parts to make flesh constructs or other kinds of creations that he then sends into battle.
Mm-hmm. And he's no slouch in battle himself, is he?
He's not. He's remembered all his medical training.
It's true. He can use his surgical tools and skull saw to take attacks on opponents that ignore pretty much all the defensive tech out there. He's got precise, so he can ignore hard to kill, shielded, yep,
hard to wound, armor, all those things. Yep. He also heals every time he hits an enemy.
He sure does. And most of his crew can heal from poison instead of taking damage from it, which he hands out loads of.
Oh, like candy, he gives it out. So McMourning's title version, Dr. McMourning Insanitary, is a little bit less about getting in there and carving things up himself. But he's really loves to experiment on the battlefield. So what he will do is stitch extra parts onto his creatures. Extra head, extra arms, extra legs, extra fat. And once they've got those upgrades on them, not only are they tougher, but they can lose the upgrade to cancel some damage.
They sure can. It really takes a keyword that is sort of durable, but not super tough, and takes it over that edge where they can be pretty difficult to deal with. And all the extra mobility and such that he can give his crew from stitching those extra body parts onto him, they can get upfield pretty quick.
He can also, if he really doesn't want to spend too much time poisoning himself, Dr. McMourning can just poison the enemy and then burn him out.
Yep. And he has an extremely powerful ability, one that really doesn't have a parallel anywhere else in the game, where he can take an ability on one of his models and literally stitch that ability onto another model.
And there are some models that are just not designed to have each other's attacks. So you can really break the game a bit.
Yeah, like a zombie chihuahua that has a rogue necromancy's enormously threatening attack.
So overall, McMourning's a really great master. He's very flexible. He has the ability to really bring a threat that's kind of unique to the enemy. And if all else fails, you can just summon a bunch of flesh constructs.
Sure can. That's Doug.
That's Doug. Now we're going to talk about Kirai and Koku.
Yeah, we sure are. The literal personification of vengeance.
Oh, yes. Kirai's kind of got a sad story. She was brought to Malifaux not entirely willingly, and she worked in a house of ill repute, and there she met a man named Francis, and fortunately, the two of them fell in love. Unfortunately, Francis's father was the governor general, and he took a pretty dim view of this.
He was not happy about this situation.
So when he found out, he sent assassins to kill Kirai. Francis leapt in front of her and took the bullet, dying himself. Kirai got away, but that ruined any chance she had at happiness, and she has become consumed with vengeance. And with the help of the Grave Spirit, she's able to get it.
Yeah, and that spirit of vengeance is played out across her entire crew. They literally have a keyword ability called Vengeance, where anytime that you deal damage to them, your model takes damage in turn.
They're also all incorporeal because they are all spirits. That's something that sets her apart from the other Resurrectionists who like to summon zombies and things made of flesh and metal. Her models can move through terrain. They can move through other models. They don't even care.
Nope. Don't care one bit. And they can put out a healthy dose of damage, especially her totem, Akirio.
The Akirio does irreducible damage, which is not that common in the game, but it means nothing your enemy does with armor or soul stones can stop it. And when it dies, she can just summon it back.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, Akirio's title version, Envoy of the Court, reflects her time on Earth working for the Court of Two. And there she's learned to summon hordes of these little spirits. So instead of summoning big spirits, when one of her models moves through an enemy, they have to make a willpower test. And if they fail, you get a little spirit pretty much for free. So she could pretty quickly clutter up the board with these little guys that maybe don't do that much individually, but every time your opponent hits them, they'll take damage.
Yep. And they'll clog up your opponent's works and make it extremely difficult for them to score their schemes. It's kind of interesting that we have two different titles of the Master that both focus on summoning, but in very different ways. It makes for a pretty diverse playstyle.
But if you like summoning, which is something that Malifaux really kind of stands apart from other games with, the amount of summoning you can do, Kirai is one of the best summoners in the game.
Absolutely.
Very competitive.
And that's Kirai.
The next Master we're going to talk about, we said there was one good person in the Resurrectionists, and I think it's time to talk about Harley Quinn. I mean, Molly Squidpitch.
Yeah, tell me about it. So Molly is a really, really interesting model, and you can talk a little bit more about the lore, but she used to be a journalist, did she not?
She did, and she wrote about Seamus, which he did not particularly enjoy.
He did not take kindly to that, no.
He decided to show his displeasure by killing her and resurrecting her. But in doing so, he used the Gorgon's Tear, a very powerful and unique soulstone. And so when Molly came back, she came back with her full faculties, her intelligence, and some pretty unusual powers.
That she did.
She's been striking up on her own. She's no longer subservient to Seamus. She's off making friends, hanging out with Poison Ivy, just, really being her own woman now. And so her keyword, the Forgotten, consists of all the undead that for one reason or another have slipped through the cracks, are abandoned by their creators, and don't really have a friend.
That's right, but they are great friends with each other, are they not?
And with their mistress, Molly. Her crew focuses around the Fading ability. A model with Fading, when it discards a card, gets to trigger an effect. And all the models in her crew discard cards to trigger different effects they have. Flurry, for example. It's discard a card to get an extra attack. So what Molly does is she allows you to draw a ton of cards, which you can then discard to activate your various abilities, which then triggers Fading. She also can punish enemies pretty hard.
Oh, yeah. So she's got a pretty interesting ability where if an enemy model takes the same action more than once per activation, they end up getting punished by taking 2 damage for taking that action a second time. And that's especially nasty when you take into account models that have triggers to take additional attacks, masters that already have 3 AP, anything like that. You can actually deal quite a bit of damage to yourself if you're not careful.
Yes, Molly's very strong. And she's played by Margot Robbie, which I've always appreciated. The Molly's title version, Molly Chaotic Conductor, is a little bit different. She focuses much more on mobility. She leads a parade, in fact. So her crew, she doesn't have quite as much card draw as her original. But one thing that she does do is she allows her discarding to be much more flexible. Because when she discards a card, she can allow any other model nearby to resolve its Fading ability.
Yeah. There's actually a lot of similarity in playstyle between her and Sandeep, minus the summoning, where you are allowing your other models to use their abilities outside of activation to the greatest effect that you can come up with.
She can also push them around on the table and push enemies around. So she's very much about the positional game.
Yeah.
But either way you play her, Molly is a keyword that's very focused on the interesting little tricks that the Resurrectionists can do. She's not all in on summoning like some of the others, but she's much more about getting the most out of the models you've already got.
Yeah, definitely. Molly is a great choice for a new player as well. If they're interested in getting into Resurrectionists, I think Molly is probably just about the best master you could choose.
And that's Molly.
That's Molly.
Reva Cortinas was an ordinary little girl who had a very extraordinary ability to calm people who talked to her, but she was very strange. She would wander through graveyards at night, talking to people that her parents couldn't see, and they worried about her. So they brought in a guild exorcist named Vincent St. Clair to try to exorcise whatever was wrong with their daughter. But when he saw her, Vincent realized that there was nothing wrong with Reva at all. The problem was with her parents. So he untied her from where they had her tied down, led her out of the house, and she never looked back.
Not once.
Reva, her keyword, the Revenants, consist of her followers. Now, I don't want to use the word cult leader, But Reva's followers are unusually devoted to her.
They're very devoted. Yeah.
And her followers unusually consist of both living and undead, living in peace with each other. Now, these are often people who have suffered terrible harms or traumas, but around Reva, they're able to be calm. They're able to have a sense of acceptance that they don't get elsewhere. And the undead as well are maybe able to accept the violence of their deaths and move peacefully to their final frontier. So on the table, Reva is probably most notable for riding on the back of an undead horse.
She sure is. Sometimes people complain about the size of that horse. I feel like that's unfounded.
She is very fast. And in addition to the speed that she brings just from being on horseback, she has the ability to attack through corpse markers, which means it's very hard to hide from Reva. She can get you basically wherever you are.
Exactly.
And that's without even taking into account her lampads and her corpse candles, her burning undead, which are able to skip around the board and position themselves just where they need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. She also is another one of the masters that can really put out a lot of pyro markers to jam up movement lanes. Very similar to Karis in that regard. She can actually use those pyro markers to great effect, though.
Yes, definitely. She can either pulse damage out from pyro markers, or she can just use the burning they generate to get plus twists on a lot of her duels and attacks.
Yeah, she sure can. It really can put a lot of board control in her court. She can really dictate where your opponent can and cannot move. And I really like her. I think she's one of my favorite masters in the faction.
Oh, she's great. And she also has a very cool title version, Reva Cortinas Luminary. She started channeling a new burning energy, which is perhaps a little bit dangerous, especially when you figure out where it's coming from. But she uses it to pretty good effect.
She sure does. And she's grown a little bit in this, too. She's gotten rid of her horse. She's back on foot. And she definitely has a little bit more of a cult leader vibe with this particular title.
Yeah, especially when she just straight up kills her followers to save her life.
She sure can do that. Yeah.
But she's also able to buff them pretty significantly.
Oh, yeah.
And when she's out there with her model, she can put this Luminary's Chosen trigger on them that causes all nearby models to deal extra damage, which is enormously substantial, especially when Vincent St. Clair, the Exorcist, is just shooting people with his crossbow.
Yeah, and if you like playing the terrain marker game and you like dropping pyro markers, she does it like no other. When she drops her pyro markers, she can also move enemy models. She can deal damage to them. It can be a lot to deal with for the opponent.
And while Reva is not really a summoner like some of the other Resurrectionists, her title version can summon lampads.
Sure can.
Which are these nasty flame spirits.
Yes, definitely.
So there's that little bit edge there that when you kill somebody, you harness their ghost. That's Reva.
That's Reva.
The next Resurrectionist Master is actually new this edition.
Yes.
Professor Albus von Schtook.
Yes.
He's shown up before in the lore. Von Schtook was an astronomer who came to Malifaux to study the skies of an unfamiliar planet. And unfortunately, the skies of Malifaux do not obey the laws of physics that you might be familiar with. They would change every time he looked at them, and von Schtook's orderly mind couldn't take that. It drove him insane, and he fled into the sewers so he wouldn't have to look up and see the stars anymore. And while he was down there, he heard the whisper.
Yes.
Von Schtook's insanity has taken a very specific form. He was a professor before, and he still is, at the University of Transmortis. He builds most of his students himself out of a combination of corpses and scrap. And it's true that mostly in their classes, they're pretty quiet, but they're very good at practical demonstrations, and the valedictorian has really exceeded all of his expectations.
She sure has.
So von Schtook's keyword, the Transmortis keyword, consists of his students and his fellow teacher, Anna Lovelace. And they're pretty nasty.
They really are. One of their keyword abilities is new to the game, and that's if he shares a suit in the final duel total with his opponent in resisted duels, his crew can actually draw a card. And he's pretty unusual in that some models in his crew, and especially him, actually have suits built into some of their actions that they don't need for triggers.
Yeah,
specifically so that they can trigger studied opponent.
Yeah, he doesn't need them at all. He's also got good triggers, though.
He sure does. And he has the ability to really enhance his crew, and his summoning mechanic is one that can really snowball.
It's very unique. When he doesn't quite summon directly. What he will do is he will attach an upgrade to a friendly model. And when that friendly model kills an enemy, you recruit them. And so they become a new student.
Yeah, makes for some pretty substantial soulstone swings during games. I mean, if he kills your 7-stone model and turns it into his own 7-stone model, that's a big shift.
Oh, yeah. He's also got a fairly nasty attack himself. He's been adjusted in power once since the game launched, and he's still considered very competitive, although he's not quite at the ridiculous height that he was at before.
Mm-hmm.
His models are very durable, though, with armor and hard to wound and big health pools, so it's very hard to get them off the table.
Absolutely. And his other teacher, Anna, is, in my opinion, probably one of the best models in the game.
Anna's super strong. She interferes with your opponents. They can't summon near her. They can't place near her. She does a lot.
Yeah.
Now, von Schtook's title, he's regained some of his love of looking up at the stars.
Sure has.
Von Schtook Stargazer.
He's got a super cool model, by the way.
He has a very cool model.
Yeah.
He's much more about scheme markers.
Mm-hmm.
He has the ability to drop scheme markers at range, but he has the very cool and unique ability that when his models are attacking an enemy that's near a scheme marker, they can treat that enemy as being a beast, a construct, an undead, or a living model, even if it isn't normally. And that's very important because a lot of models in his crew have different abilities that only trigger against specific targets. And he himself has a very strong ability that has different effects depending on which of those characteristics the target has.
Sure does.
He also has the ability to just turn somebody insignificant, which is incredibly strong.
Yeah, very strong. And he has an extremely powerful shockwave, one of the few shockwave radius 3 effects in the game, where instead of he can affect his enemy models, and his friendly models can actually heal from that shockwave rather than taking damage.
Yes.
Pretty cool.
Especially given how durable they are. So von Schtook is very competitive. He's a strong crew with good durability, good hitting power, and he also draws like 5 or 6 cards a turn for no reason.
Yeah, definitely.
So
very
he's
strong.
Very, very strong, and also a good master to start with, I think, because his crew are very solid all-rounders that don't necessarily need to specialize into one thing.
Yeah, it's a great way to start the game when you know that your models are going to stay on the table. It's good stuff.
That's von Schtook.
We've got Seamus.
We got
next.
Seamus.
Seamus?
Seamus.
You don't want your pillow out for this, Doug?
Can you just put the pillow behind us for this one?
It's important.
Yeah. Well, let's do
important.
Jan Lo while we're
I
waiting.
think everyone's in agreement.
Yeah, we'll do Jan Lo.
I think
Okay.
we fucking have the technology.
Okay.
We do.
So give it to us, and then I'll say the next master is, and I'm going to pull it out and say Seamus. Okay. So next, we're going to talk about Jan Lo.
Or David Lopan, as it were.
Someone at Weird really loves Big Trouble in Little China. This is not the last reference to that movie that you're going to see.
There are quite a few of them, for sure.
So Jan Lo is a Resurrectionist 10 Thunders dual faction master. And also, like a couple of the other masters we've talked about, he's a dual keyword master, which is very interesting.
Yep.
So Jan Lo was originally a sorcerer long ago. He was a part of a ring of sorcerers, but he was betrayed by the others who were trying to summon evil Oni to take over the world. Jan Lo stopped them, but in revenge, they shattered his spirit and cast him into the paths beyond. And over the course of centuries, Jan Lo has gradually been able to rebuild his spirit and his consciousness and try to come back to the world. And what he's found is that his tether to the world are all of his descendants, the various people in his bloodline in the centuries since he's died. Many of them have also died since, as you might imagine. And so Jan Lo's crew consists of both his modern-day followers, but also the spirits of his descendants, the ancestors, who he's able to call back into being, which leads to some very unique play.
It does. So the first version of Jan Lo is a master that he can be pretty difficult to wrap your head around. He's fairly complicated, but he's got a lot of really cool tricks. His key mechanic is really his ascendant upgrades. So as the game progresses, he can attach a new upgrade every turn, which increases his stats and gives him access to additional abilities to make him into an extremely powerful board presence by the end of the game.
Yes, and as he gets these new ascendant upgrades, not only do his attacks get better, but he unlocks new things on his card. The other big mechanic is reliquaries. All of these ancestors, when they die, a reliquary upgrade is attached to a nearby friendly model. This gives them new abilities, but Jan Lo can also use that reliquary to rebuild a dead ancestor once he has 3 or more ascendant upgrades attached, which replaces the original model with the dead ancestor, which means your big, beefy beater models like Izamu, an animated suit of armor, or Yin, a deadly Penangolin, can be resummoned at the cost of one of your little followers, a Gokudo, perhaps. He also just has an extremely powerful attack.
He sure does.
Which at the start of the game isn't that strong, but as he stacks upgrades on himself, becomes deadly.
Yeah, and he's a master that if you let him get to turn 4 or turn 5 as the opponent, your chances of being able to put him out of the game are slim to none at that point.
You basically have to decide early on, you're either going to really go all in and sell out to kill him, or you're just going to try to ignore and mitigate him all game. You can't do it by half measures.
Can't. Definitely not.
Now, Yanlo's title version, Yanlo the Spirit Walker, is very interesting. Now, Yanlo has got his own reliquary now. He barely moves at all. His movement stat is the lowest in the game. But when his model that has his reliquary moves, he gets drawn along with it like the world's deadliest hot air balloon. So Yanlo has enormous mobility in his Spirit Walker form. He has traded away his Ascendant upgrades and his ability to resummon ancestors, but now he has Obey, which he can use to force people to do his bidding. And when he's doing it on his own models, he gets the suits he needs for both the ability and its trigger built in. So Yanlo has enormous flexibility in his title form because during his activation, you can basically have 3 other friendly models do 3 other actions, all with focus, and you can move the person he's attached to and have him move as well. He's almost impossible to pin down. He's really good at doing schemes and strategies. Generally, he trades away some of the raw killing power of Yanlo 1 for the ability to just really dominate the board.
Yeah, and don't get us wrong. He can definitely still deal some damage. His primary attack, Twist Reality, ignores armor and incorporeal. So even though it's a relatively low damage track of only 2, 3, 4, he can get through some of the most common defenses out there. And in addition to that, he's got one of the best triggers in the game, Hole in the World, to displace an enemy model 6 inches from its current position, which can be absolutely game-breaking.
Yanlo's very strong. Again, a master I would say towards the higher end of complexity.
Definitely complex, yeah.
But a master with a lot of really fun play to him, and that also just has a really cool flavored mechanic.
Yeah.
The idea that he is summoning back the spirits of his descendants, and that he is then causing his retainers to lose their lives in order to bring that ancestor spirit back into the world, it's just a real flavor win for me.
Yeah, and he's definitely a good example of a new title version that makes previously not commonly taken models into auto hires. His without directly affecting costs of models, the model choice that you bring into his crew is significantly different with version 2 than it is with version 1.
And that's Yanlo.
There you go.
The next master we're going to cover, the last one in the Resurrectionists, is Doug's favorite.
Definitely Doug's favorite.
We're going to be talking about Seamus.
The Red Chapel Killer.
Seamus was originally just a haberdasher. He came to Malifaux just to sell hats and spread fashion, but somewhere along the line, he started hearing a whisper and he went a little mad.
Sure did.
As an aside, the phrase mad as a hatter came about because in the 19th century, hatters would use mercury in their trade, and long-term exposure to mercury causes pretty serious problems.
Yep, literally makes you crazy.
Anyways, now you know.
Now you know.
So Seamus is a serial killer, probably the most infamous one in human history, and it's hard to know how many people he's killed because his crew consists of his victims. He tends to take them with him.
Yep, he sure does.
His bells, as he calls them, the people he kills, he raises from the dead, and they follow him around in a shambling parade, usually helping him do his deadly work.
They sure do.
Speaking of deadly.
He is deadly indeed. He can pop up literally out of nowhere and deal an enormous 4, 6, 8 damage track to opponents. Normally only once a turn, but
once he started killing people and corpse markers are dropping on their half of the table, he can remove those corpse markers and shoot again.
Sure can.
And the more you shoot, the more you kill. He is deadly. His maneuverability is also incredible because, like any good serial killer, he can pop out from dark alleys or places where you don't expect him to be. And his little copycat killer can switch places with him, so just when you think you've got him locked down, you've just got the copycat.
It's true. His title version is pretty interesting. It's a little bit of a throwback, isn't it?
Yeah, Sebastian Baker is Seamus's alter ego, I guess we'd say. When he's trying to blend in with the people, he pretends to be a star maker, an agent.
He sure does.
And so Seamus, aka Sebastian Baker, is a little bit more of a melee focus than the original, but he also has the ability to summon.
He sure does. He can summon his bells onto the tabletop.
And usually he wants to do it right then and there when he kills somebody. He gets a bonus if he's summoning from a corpse marker that he's dropped in the same activation.
He sure does.
But once he's got a bell summoned, he can do some pretty incredible combo play to ping-pong people around and just keep taking slaps at them with his bladed bouquet, dealing damage, inflicting distracted, and generally being a real difficult model to deal with.
That's a key aspect of his keyword. If you can get his models into the positions that they need to be in, the amount of synergy between them is really almost second to none. They can pull off some pretty incredible moves when they're in the right spots.
And so normally Seamus is just being supported by his bells. They have the ability to lure enemy models and pull them across the table. But they have some pretty interesting tricks of their own, especially when you're summoning them. And so a lot of Seamus crews are really starting to explore his keyword more when you're hiring his title version. I think that's a lot of fun to see.
Yeah, definitely. And if there's one thing that is often overlooked by newer players, is the ability to displace your opponent's models can be the difference between winning and losing a game. And Seamus's crew can displace his enemy's models better than most.
Seamus is a really cool master. He's definitely a master who's doing his own thing, and he's not so much trying to counter what your opponent is doing as he's just trying to pose a problem for them that they can't handle.
Yep.
But if you like that, and especially if you like his giant gun, you might like Seamus almost as much as Doug does, but probably not literally as much.
Probably not literally.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully.
And that's Seamus. So we hope you've enjoyed hearing about the Resurrectionists. I would not personally be very happy if you started playing them because dealing with them is a nightmare, but there's a lot to like here.
Yeah, definitely my least favorite faction to play against, that's for sure.
They're very strong, very competitive, and really good at the summoning aspect of the game, which I think is something Malifaux has as kind of a unique selling point.
Definitely.
So they're a great faction.
Yeah, they sure are.
And we hope that you've enjoyed this. If you did, please check out the article on Goonhammer, where we go over the same masters. I'd also encourage you to check out Danger Planet's Discord. Now, the article and the Discord will both be linked in the description, as well as Jesse's podcast, Boring Conversation, which I just want to shout out as a great podcast and a great resource for both starting players and people with experience in the game.
Indeed.
So you can find all that stuff in the description, but if you like the video, please comment and subscribe.
Indeed.
Yeah, we're killing it.
And like the thing.
We're murdering it. We're putting its head underwater and like holding it until the bubbles stop.
Is Yanlo in? Are we doing Yanlo?
Yeah, we're doing Yanlo. Yeah. Ready? Do we need to talk more to fix the levels? Yep. Okay.
We do.
We're
We're gonna
about
talk
fixing
some
the
more.
levels. We're going to talk about how Yanlo is really just David Lopan.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, Big Trouble in Little China is officially my favorite movie.
It's also clearly the favorite movie of several people at Weird.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
We're talking about Molly. You're talking about my other wife. I'm married to 2 women now, and one of them's Molly.